Okay, we're having an emotional moment here. Okay, I'm just going to get into the class, I think, right? Yeah. Okay, fine. All right. So first of all, yeah, I don't know whether I'm talking to the people here, the people there. We have a few audiences.
Alumni app that we recorded, that we zoomed in.
Oh, it's recorded?
Yeah.
I wanted that you make it
editing Zoom.
There you go. Yeah.
Your mom wasn't an alumni.
Ladies, very soon you're going to be alumni.
Yeah, soon you're going to be alumni also. After Shanabet. Okay. The theme for this particular, what do we want to call this, alumni gather? Like what exactly do we call this? Alumni Day of Learning. We're letting you practice the alumni early because so you shouldn't. The transition shouldn't be so difficult. Okay, I know. Just for those of you who are way in the back there, I'll try and speak a little louder. If those 25 rows could just keep it down a little bit so everyone will be able to hear. Okay, the theme of this alumni day of learning is obviously Shavuot, which is Sunapanas, the time of Kabbalat Torah, which is really would be accurate to describe it as the high point of Jewish history. We talk a lot about Yetzias Mitzrayim. Our identity is very deeply tied to Yetzias Mitzrayim, and of course everyone knows the famous Ramban, the end of Parshas Bo, right? That makes clear the idea that it's really the foundation of our emunah. Right? We always go back to that moment, but what's made absolutely clear both in Chumash itself and certainly the way Chazal read the Chumash is that departure was for a very specific purpose, which was to eventually get ourselves to Har Sinai to get the Torah. When Moshe Rabbeinu was told at the burning bush that he's going back down to Mitzrayim to take the Jews out, his first question is, on what merit? And the Kadosh Baruch Hu's answer is, you're standing on it right here. Because they're going to be coming back. You're going to lead them to Har Sinai to get the Torah. Kabbalas Torah is not the end of Jewish history, right? After all, again, it's one of the holidays in the calendar. It's not the last holiday. It's the second of the big three. If we're looking for something that connects us up to the end of Jewish history, that would be Sukkot, because there's another step after we get the Torah, which is once we've gotten it, we need to bring it down into the world. We have to come into Eretz Yisrael, Beis HaMikdash, right? The Haftarah of Sukkot is the one that connects us to Gog uMagog. The end of Jewish history is much more deeply connected to Sukkot. But certainly Shavuot is the high point in the sense that moment on Har Sinai was one of supreme closeness between ourselves and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's the moment in time after creation, the time when humanity got as close to Kadosh Baruch Hu as we would, at least in the context of this world. The Midrashim talk about the fact that all the different levels of the Shamayim were opened up. There was a level of insight there which won't be repeated until, so long as this world is this world. But, okay, having said that, what's it all about? What are we trying to achieve, right? We've been preparing for this day. We're still in the process of it. Right now we're on the 41st day of the HaOmer, right? We've been working, we've been focusing, we're building towards this thing, but what is it that we're trying to achieve? What are we really moving towards, and what is the preparation we need to do to get ready for it? We revisit this moment every year. What's it all about? We can start by saying that if Yetzias Mitzrayim itself, which is so central to us, was only for the sake of coming to receive the Torah, then it's clear that whatever the actual departure from Egypt was about was something that was incomplete, right? It was the beginning of something, but not the end of something. So we had a chance to speak about this quite a bit during the last few weeks, which is that the real theme of Yetzias Mitzrayim is not merely getting out of the physical place of Egypt, but what it really meant to get out of Mitzrayim was to get out of a world which is defined by the physical context in which we find ourselves, to recognize that it is nothing more than a context to relate to something much larger and much higher. Right? And really the theme, the way that Chazal would frame it for us is we were leaving the Malchut of Paro to enter into the Malchut of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Ein shnei malachim l'keser echad. There's no such thing as two kings for one crown. Everybody's got to serve something. So the question is, are you serving Paro with all the implications? Is your whole world in reality defined by the physical world in which we find ourselves with all that comes together with that? Or is there something deeper? Are we connected to something larger? Is there a deeper definition of who we are than just our physical being and our awareness of that physical being? That's all about the Malchut of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? And that's really what leaving Egypt was all about, culminating in basically the Korban Pesach. We spoke about the fact that the Korban Pesach is the act by which we enter into that kingship of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the whole point is, that's a relationship. And all relationships have responsibilities. Right? I'm sure that if it hasn't already been discussed in Mrs. Levitan's class, it will be discussed. Right? All relationships have responsibilities. So if we're entering into this relationship of Malchut with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, that comes with responsibilities also. Like, what does a king do? What do kings do? Kings, they rule, right? They rule. They make rules, mitzvot. And the reality was, as we were leaving Mitzrayim, we may have made a claim. We may have declared the fact that we recognize the Kadosh Baruch Hu as our Melech, but there really wasn't any content yet to what that relation was really all about. There weren't any mitzvahs. Ramban also makes this particular point, not the famous Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo, but other famous Rambans. Multiple times the Ramban cites a Mechilta, a Medrash, that talks about the fact that why do we juxtapose Anochi Hashem Elokecha in the Asaras Dibros with Lo Yeh Lecha Elohim Acharim Al Panai, that there won't be another in front of me? Says the Mechilta, you accepted my Malchus in Mitzrayim. Now here at Har Sinai, it's time to accept my decrees. Kibalti Malchusi Tikabel Gezerosai. It sounds like what Shavuos and Kabbalah Torah is really all about is about the mitzvahs. However, if we remember back to that, what we might call the high point of the Seder, which was the fact that we'd finally reached the point where we were confident we were going to make it to the meal, right? Dayenu, right? In the words of our Dayenu, welcome all. Right? One of the stanzas in Dayenu was Ilu kiravnu lifnei Har Sinai v'lo nosan lanu es Torah Dayenu. If you'd brought us to Har Sinai and not given us the actual Torah, that would have been enough. Well, what does that mean? How do you understand that? How does that make any sense at all? How can we praise the HaKadosh Baruch Hu for this moment of closeness at Har Sinai, distinct from receiving the actual Torah there? It's clear that the mitzvahs are not all that it's about. And for those of you who are listening, who spend time in Shana Bet, right, to go down memory lane, remember that the pasuk in Shir Shirim, which references Shavuos and Kabbalah Torah, is Yishikeni Minashikos Pihu Ki Tovim Dodecha Miyayin. The Kala in Shir Shirim, remembering back to that moment, which again is actually referring to Har Sinai, longingly says, kiss me with the kisses of your mouth because your love is more dear than wine. Right? Wine here is actually referring to the actual Torah. And we're talking about over here, again, the Yishikeni Minashikos Pihu, right, is the two kisses that are being referred to in the pasuk are actually referring to that moment of indescribable closeness that Klal Yisrael achieved with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, knows that the Kadosh Baruch Hu actually spoke to us directly. Yishikeni Minashikos Pihu Ki Tovim Dodecha Miyayin. Now the truth is, what that means is, we're actually talking about a moment where we're actually being commanded in a mitzvah, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the mitzvah of Emunah, but it's clear from the emphasis in the pasuk, or at least we don't seem to be focusing exactly on the command aspect of it, Ki Tovim Dodecha Miyayin. Even better than the content of the Torah itself was that moments of an inexpressible, inexplicable closeness which we achieve with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. If we want to understand where Shlomo Melech is directing our attention and Chazal are directing our attention when they talk about what was happening there, they're interested in this moment of indescribable connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, which happened, which was the context within which we heard the Asaras Dibros. This makes sense if we think about it. There's also something we've spoken about frequently. Again, we're entering into a relationship of Malchus. Malchus has rules. In our context, we call those rules mitzvot. Right? We have all these commands from Kadosh Baruch Hu, the things that we need to do. But as we point out so often, Kadosh Baruch Hu, when He commands us to do things, He doesn't command us to do them because He needs the thing done. If Kadosh Baruch Hu needs something done, He created the world. He doesn't need us to accomplish tasks, right? When we're commanded in the midst of tzedakah to give money to the ani, it's not because He needs someone else to give the money to the ani. He's perfectly capable of doing it Himself. He gives everybody else their parnasa. So why is it that we're commanded in the midst of tzedakah? Because of what happens to us as a result of doing those mitzvahs. Meaning how it is that we change and how we develop by doing these actions. Right? We have mitzvahs. Mitzvot are the center point of the relationship, but it's a very unusual relationship of malchus. Usually a melech needs avadim. He needs his servants because he wants things to be done. He can't do it himself. But that does not characterize our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. He doesn't need us to accomplish something. So why are we the ones that are being commanded to do these things? It's because of how it is that we are transformed through doing those mitzvahs. Right? How we're transformed into how it is that we bond to a Kadosh Baruch Hu by doing these actions. Rav Dessler famously asks the question, what's more important, the Torah or the mitzvahs? And as we've described, when we speak about this crucial Rav Dessler, right, when he talks about Torah, he's not talking about just the process of learning or the content of Torah. What he means is the internal awareness generated through Torah, that inner sense of connectedness to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. What's more important, that or mitzvahs? So traditionally, we're taught that what we're usually taught is when we have to make the choice between those two, which one's more important? The mitzvahs are what's going on the inside. What? But we've talked about this before, so we know what the answer to this question is, right? What? Rav Dessler tells us the Torah. He brings chazals that go both ways, going in either direction, but he settles with the Zohar that tells us Rachmana Liba Boy, that the Torah really wants that internal self. Why then are we commanded in the mitzvahs? What's the point of the mitzvahs? So if we understand that Rachmana Liba Boy, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants our heart, then the obvious question is, what exactly is this heart that we're talking about? What he wants is he wants to be connected to us. Who exactly is the us that he wants to be connected to? Right? So you could think, if you want to talk about the sort of inner sense of connectedness to Kadosh Baruch Hu, the question is that me or just something I'm thinking about? Right? So the reality is, what makes a human being human? What defines our humanity uniquely from any other entity in creation? It's the connection between a neshama and a goof. The fact that we are spiritual beings and physical beings. Well, really, the "and" is not really the right word. We're not these two elements, but really we're in an indescribable merging of these two entities. Who are you? We all have a neshama, and the neshama all emanates directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We all have a body. We all have a presence in the physical world. What makes each one of us an individual? What makes each one of us distinct is the fact that spiritual entity called the neshama, it merges with the body. And in that merging is created a unique individual. But who are we? We're not the neshama. We're not the goof. We're something that arises through the integration of those two. That integration that we ourselves create through our actions and our choices throughout our lives. Basically, says Rav Dessler, the significance of mitzvahs is that if I have an ideal, what we talk about, this inner sense of whatever, however you want to phrase it, these ideals that we have, if I am not compelled to act on those ideals, then they're not ideals, they're ideas. They're things that are in my mind, they're memories, they're thoughts, they are not me. How do I measure? How do I determine that a thought is not something that I'm just thinking, but is who I actually am? If it's integrated into my physical being to the point where I feel compelled to act on those ideals. Right? That's where we find the achievement of the integration between this internal self and that physical being, which is really who we are. Right? That aspect of us, our memories are not going to carry on to eternity. We are going to carry on to eternity, not our memories. But where's the we as opposed to the memories? It's those ideas that are so much a part of us that I need to act on them. Who I am in this merging between a physical and a spiritual, they come together and they express the fact that there's an ideal that I feel the need to act on. The mitzvahs are a litmus test. They're a measurement for, and again, we have to do that. It's not through the mitzvahs we can measure the fact that an ideal is really a part of us and not merely something that we're thinking about. I think maybe the word we're really looking for here is, where is our dedication, right? What are we dedicated to? What really defines who we are? And really, this is what Sefirat HaOmer has been all about the whole time. We've spoken about this a few times already during the last couple of weeks. That whole focus on midot, the midot are that bridge between the two. The midot are where that spiritual self and that physical being actually integrate with one another, and the development of that aspect of our personality, so that our physical being becomes a medium to express those spiritual ideals, rather than merely using consciousness as a way to find my own self, to fulfill my own selfish needs. That's the process of Sefirat HaOmer. That's how we get ourselves to Kabbalas HaTorah. Meaning, if Kabbalas HaTorah is all about connecting up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where who we truly are, connect up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the preparation for that is developing this we-iness, if you want to put it that, the we-iness, which is that identity of who I am as an instrument for expressing the spiritual ideals of my neshama. You could ask an obvious question, which Chazal do ask, which is, why do it this way? Why is it make a being that's spiritual and physical, so he has to go to all the trouble of developing himself so the two are integrated, to have the connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu? Why not just create a world and have a relationship with Malachim? I understand in your mother's eyes you are, but in a Kadosh Baruch Hu's eyes it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? Why not? Why go through this process where who it is that we are that's trying to relate to is such this complicated process of creation? Just go straight to the Malachim. The answer is because we don't appreciate how astonishing we are, right? A human being, when we talk about a spiritual essence, we're talking about something that's called Tselem Elokim. We're talking about a spark from a Kadosh Baruch Hu himself, right? We have a divinity to us, which is so remarkable that if there wasn't a physical vessel to contain it and hold it, it would simply disappear back into a Kadosh Baruch Hu himself. Right? Think of that moment on Har Sinai when a Kadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself to the Jewish people with Anochi Hashem Elokecha. What happened in that moment? The Medrash tells us everybody died. Right? It's not the ideal first date, but whatever. It's like everybody died. But what does it mean that people died when a Kadosh Baruch Hu spoke those words Anochi Hashem Elokecha? What it means is that a Kadosh Baruch Hu revealed his existence with such clarity that neshama that is so definitive of who we are just could not hold back from returning back to its source. Right? Under normal circumstances, the Kadosh Baruch Hu is not so revealed, but this moment gives us a sense of exactly what the neshama is. The neshama is actually an extension of a Kadosh Baruch Hu himself. As a result of that, the only thing that holds us, that allows us to exist, that allows that neshama to exist separate from him, is the fact that it's in a physical vessel. Right? Think of a breath that you want to capture, right? The only way you can capture it is if you blow it into a balloon. There has to be something that holds it, right? It's actually something a little bit more intense than that here. But that's a reasonable first metaphor for understanding why it is that creation necessarily has to be with beings that are physical also. Kadosh Baruch Hu is what justifies creation is the fact that the beings that he's relating to, us, human beings, are that sacred. They are that high. You are that special, right? You have an element of a Kadosh Baruch Hu himself inside of you. We all have that inside of us. We spoke also, obviously, a longer discussion to understand that in addition to this, if there wasn't some level of blocking of our vision of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, we would not be able to make any choices. What makes any relationship meaningful is that we enter into it voluntarily, right? That relationship, the love of one person to another, cannot be dictated. It can't be something that has to happen. It has to be something that a person chooses for it to have any meaning. Our physical being is the thing that allows us to be entities that choose. Both the alumni and present students don't need to go into all the time that we spent on understanding exactly how significant this idea of making choices is to this relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. The bottom line is, what it is to be human, to be a physical being as well as a spiritual being, and what our job is as we move towards Har Sinai is to bring these two together. We have to answer that question, right? Am I a neshama expressing myself through a guf, or am I guf? It's just enjoying the time here, using the neshama as a pilot to get me to my own selfish needs. That's the question we're asking. That's who we are. That's what we're doing as we're moving toward Har Sinai. But what is this dedication we're talking about that we're trying to, that's that moment on Har Sinai? What does it really look like? What are we really describing here? And this really gets to the essence of what Shavuos is all about and what is that we spend our lives trying to achieve. And that moment of closeness is a connection that's so deep that we cannot distinguish our own individual being from our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's a lot of words, but that's the goal. That's what it means to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that was the moment that we experienced on Har Sinai. Say it again. Yeah. What does it really mean? What is the closeness that we're talking about here? And I'll go into more detail. I'm going to explain it in a second, but what does it mean what does it really mean to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's to come to the point where I cannot distinguish myself, my identity, from my connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where do we see this? The one description of what it was like to be on Har Sinai that we find in the Chumash is that in the context of everything that was going on there, the thunder, the lightning, the shofar, the voice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in Parshas Yisro we're told that as we were listening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we were roim es hakolos. We saw the voice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what the pasuk says. What exactly does this mean? What does it mean to see a voice? So again, we've spoken about this before for the alumni. This will also be a little bit of a trip down memory lane. But when we talk about Chumash, whenever we're dealing with Torah, we're dealing with a document that is always aware of a deeper conceptual context than what it's just talking about. When you use words like seeing and hearing, you have to understand what does it really mean to see something, and what does it really mean to hear something. So sight is a connection to something which is compellingly real. Once upon a time, seeing was believing, and then we got Photoshop. Right? That's part of the gullus, right? What is it? Re'iyah, raya, same word. Proof, sight, same thing. Seeing is believing. Right? Seeing is engaging something in a way in which its reality is compelling for you. There's a limitation on what you can see. You can only see something that's right in front of you. But what you see is real. Hearing gives me connection to things that are much further away, But we don't say hearing is believing. Right? I can't testify in court about things I hear. I can only testify in court about things that I see. Right? If I hear behind the wall something going on, I have an idea of what's going on there, but I don't know for sure what it's really all about. I'm connected to it, but without clarity. Hearing is a connection to something where I can connect to more things, but the compelling reality of it is on a much lesser level than it is by sight. Normally, the way that we experience ourselves in this world, post-Adam Rishon, is what's real for us is pizza. Right? What's real for us is our physical experience. Right? I think any of the President Shana Aleph students will be able to say this over, right? Taking you down to a moment in the dining hall on pizza day, those days when you rush out of your Ramchal class with such vigor, right? You remember those moments of biting into, the pizza isn't so good. Whatever, let's take you to it. Right? What's the place on the corner that everybody goes to? What? David's? No, they don't go there. Denya. Say cheese? Which one is that? Oh, Shalzen? They changed hands. We're not talking about this. This is a painful subject for me. Whatever. Anyway, you're biting through the sort of cornmeal that keeps the crust from sticking to the pan, through the crunchy, slightly burnt part till you get to the soft, doughy part in the middle. Then finally your tooth breaks through and through the chewy cheese so that that slightly melted salty oil hits your tongue and Gan Eden, right? Right? It doesn't get any better than this, right? Right? So, I'm embarrassing Mrs. Kagan once again. Okay, there seems to be a continuing theme in our marriage. Okay, whatever. But let's face it, ladies, that pizza is real, right? No South Africans, although we could talk about bultong, whatever. But the physical reality is real for us, right? And then when, I don't know, who's the most esoteric teacher in the school at this point? Rabbi Turner is talking about, I don't know, whoever's talking about the seventh rakia and all these other kinds of things. Who talks about these things now? Silver. There you go, Mrs. Silver, right? Mrs. Silver is talking about she goes to the eighth rakia. They don't even have an eighth rakia, whatever. But you're talking about all these, it's like, I hear it. It's very distant because it is not the reality that we occupy. We live in the physical world with an internal connection to a spiritual reality. We know that it's there, or we're pretty sure that it's there. We're connected to it. But it isn't the actual reality that we occupy. Right? We would call spiritual experience for us is called hearing something. Whereas physical experience is called seeing it. When it says at Har Sinai, we were roim es hakolos, we saw the voice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, these words have to ring in our eyes. Right? Right? The reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence and connection was compelling. It was reality for us. And the only way to understand that is that what happened on Har Sinai was not something that happened to us, but it was something that was us. Meaning that we were transformed in the moment of Har Sinai. Instead of being a body with a neshama, we became a neshama with a body. Right? We occupied, we were present in that spiritual, we were defined around that spiritual dimension, and our bodies became, it's very difficult to imagine, but I could be standing up here talking about, say, cheese, and you say, I hear it. Why would anybody do that, right, to themselves? All right, whatever. But just saying that it was flipped. We became neshamas with a goof instead of a goof with a neshama. At that point, the compelling reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was something that was more real to us than our own existence. Right? That was what that moment of Har Sinai was really all about. That's what it means to say that at that moment the Jewish people died. Right? What it means is that it became it was not possible for us to hang on to our own individual existence in that moment because the Kadosh Baruch Hu was more real to us at that moment than our own individual existence. The Rambam actually holds that we did not hear the words Anochi Hashem Elokecha. The Rambam understands that what happened on Har Sinai was we were so intensely aware of the presence of the Kadosh Baruch Hu that the implication of that was Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Otzeisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. Meaning, we didn't need it's not the words. We didn't even hear the words. It's what the words imply that we experienced. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was there to the point where we weren't able to hold on to the fact that we were connecting to Him as opposed to Him to us. In that moment, right, we talk about the Shekhinah of HaKadosh. The way to understand, I think, one of the easiest ways to understand it is like this: that the Shem of the Shekhinah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yud Hey. We have a number of different names for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we talk about the Shekhinah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're talking about His connection to physical reality. That's really what we're talking about. The first half of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? The second half of the Yud Kei Vav Kei is talking about His actualization into history. But the first half is His actual connection to physical reality, which actually comes necessarily through Kol Yisrael. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not connect to physical reality. The Gemara tells us that your sukkah, the schach in your sukkah cannot be closer to the ground than 10 tfachim. And explains the Gemara why. Because that schach represents the presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, the connection of a Kadosh Baruch Hu to the world, and He Himself doesn't come within 10 tfachim of the ground. Okay, again, these numbers, the numbers are not important to us so much as what the Gemara is really trying to communicate is a Kadosh Baruch Hu is a completely spiritual being and has no direct connection to physical reality whatsoever. How is He connected to physical reality? He's connected through us. Effectively, the Hey of the Yud Hey is really Klal Yisrael. As we've spoken about so many times, right? When we look at this letter of Hey, right, we see it has two parts to it, right? There's a Daled, right, which is represents, for those of you who remember your geometry, I know painful memory, right? A flat physical coordinate plane. It has no depth to it whatsoever. It's physical reality without meaning. The Yud is a connection to a realm of meaning, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu is the Yud is a letter that doesn't touch the ground. It's complete spiritual reality. The Hey, which represents, together with that Yud represents a Kadosh Baruch Hu's connection to the world, is that physical reality with that spiritual entity inside of us. The Hey is effectively the Jewish people, right? This is who we are. Which means that this spiritual core, which represents our neshama exactly, it's Chelek Elokam Imal. It's coming from there. It's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is who we are, meaning we're a physical being, but when we connect up to that true internal self that's so divine, we want to know where's that really emanating from? What's its ultimate source? It's coming into us from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the Vayipach Ba'apav Nishma. Nishama means breathing. Whose breathing are we talking about? Nishama. We're talking about the breathing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? We live very far away from this reality. We live anchored very much in our physical being, but we have the potential to go within deeper and deeper and deeper. And if we go deep enough, what we will find is we are effectively a channel for HaKadosh Baruch Hu into this world. What is our humanity? What makes me a me? I am a potential, a possibility for bringing this into the physical world. Right? I can't separate my identity from that, not merely the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's a very specific kind of a connection. I'm the one that affords HaKadosh Baruch Hu expression into the world, and that's who and what I am. We talk about dedication. When we talk about mitzvahs, right? We're coming to Har Sinai. What are we missing? We're missing the mitzvahs. But the point of the mitzvahs is, for us, the point of the mitzvahs is there's a specific actions that we need to be doing. But why do we need to be doing? Not because HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs them done, but because through doing those actions and defining myself around those actions, what I'm doing is I am becoming this person who's bringing Kadosh Baruch Hu into the world. Right? The point that ultimate sense of closeness, which itself is a mitzvah. That dodecha, that incredible love that we feel for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we feel Him feeling towards us, is expressed in the fact that I am aware of myself as a conduit of the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the world. Right? And it's based on this that one of the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is actually Ani. Right? I. Right? I. There's the possibility that my awareness of myself as an individual is actually a name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meaning I can come to the point where that identity of subjective individual self is actually indistinguishable from connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's actually the deeper side of why the mitzvah of Emunah comes to us in the language of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Right? When we read the Torah, we say Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It's a very funny thing. We're referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? We're referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we say Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Now you can only do that if you become, if the I is a small I and not a capital I, right? Where you're aware, when you use that term, that I-ness is actually anchored beyond me. It's not inside of me. It's a very strange concept, very difficult to grasp onto. But I can use the word I, and it doesn't mean me, it means through me. Doesn't mean me, it means through me. It's anchored someplace else. This really, on Har Sinai, what do we hear? We hear Anochi Hashem Elokecha. We know this is the mitzvah that commands us in Emunah. Right? What does Emunah really mean? What does it mean? I say the words. What does it help? What am I really required? What does it mean to say that I believe that God exists? Essentially, what we learned on Har Sinai was what it really means to believe in God is to experience His existence more intensely and more compellingly than my own awareness of myself as an individual. It's a big thing. It's a big thing, and I don't mean to, I suppose you probably think I sound abstract. But, on a certain level, in those moments when we're alone with ourselves, those are the moments that give us the potential for a sense of real connectedness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Those are the moments that give us the possibility for this kind of emunah. Right? If I could actually taste myself on that level at all, again, emunah is like who needs you to say I believe, to say those words? What does it mean that I can stir myself up to or I come to some intellectual awareness that God is there, or even intellectual proof that God must exist? None of this is adequate. Right? What it really means to believe in a HaKadosh Baruch Hu is His existence is more real to me than I am, and the only place to get there is through an awareness of my own sense of self. Right? I said this before. The alumni may have heard this from me before. One of the reasons why emunah is so weak in the generation that we live in is because we really don't spend any time being aware of our own existence. Right? The pasuk in Tehillim says, "L'hagid b'boker chazdecha ve'emunascha b'leilos," to say in the morning the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His emunah at night. So Moshe Shapiro explained, we recognize the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the morning because in the morning the light is there and we see all the amazing world that He's created for us. Right? All the things that are out there. Right? Your teacher, it's your students. If it's a student, then it's the lunch. But whatever. But it's a world full of the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all the things. But because we're distracted by our awareness of this world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us, we forget that there's a me looking at that world. Right? We're so involved in looking at the world and understanding the world, we forget that there's a me that's looked at, myself that's looking at that world. When do you have an opportunity to be aware of that self? Is when the world disappears. And when does the world disappear? Beleilos, when the lights go out, and you're alone with yourself. But we live in a world where the lights never go out, right? It's always morning for us, right? The lights are always on. We're very, very far away from it. In his words, we live in a society that's made war a night, right? We don't have those moments of quiet internal awareness separate from the world around us to engage that Anochi and to taste the fact that it's connected, it's nothing more than the emanation from something larger, something higher than us. Shavuos is the time to try to remember that. Right? Shavuos is, as we move towards Shavuos, that moment on, as the light is dawning in the morning on Shavuos after that long night, however it is that you spend your Shavuos, right? The moment of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, that's what we're trying to remember. That's what we're trying to re-engage. That's what we're trying to emphasize. That's what we're trying to understand. That's what we're trying to reconnect to. And what it means to connect to that is really what Har Sinai and Kabbalah Torah is all about. It's all about emunah, which is the basis of all the mitzvahs. And the emunah is predicated on the ability for us to actually be able to experience ourselves. I'm not trying to be so abstract. It sounds abstract. I invite you to spend time thinking about what I'm saying, because ultimately, in the world that we're living in, this is the key to everything. Because the world only becomes increasingly distracting with every passing day. Right? We're always given more and more excuses and invitations to distract ourselves from ourselves. And one of the things that it does to us is it empties us out in a way that it makes emunah something very difficult to be meaningful to us. Right? Shavuos is a time to be thinking about these ideas and trying to reconnect with them. And and that gives us a foundation for the rest of the year and all the mitzvahs that come along with it. Pleasure.